You want to go to college? Good. Figure it out yourself, my mother said, while sliding a $250,000 tuition check across the table to my little sister. Same table, same dinner, same parents, but a completely different daughter. 7 years, I stood at the back of my sister's wedding. It was a wedding paid for by the same parents who couldn't spare a single dime for my future. My mother scanned the room and whispered to my father, "Why does it feel like something's missing?" Before anyone could answer, the groom turned pale. He looked at me, then back at Savannah, then back at me again, and he said one word that silenced 200 guests. Sitting here with my coffee, watching the world drift by, reminds me that life eventually balances the scales. Welcome to the Turning Tables channel. Where are you joining us from, and what is your favorite drink right now? I always look forward to reading your comments. But first, we have to go back to that kitchen table. The dinner table that night wasn't just the place where my future was signed away. It was quite literally a crime scene. I did not go to my room to cry or to pack my bags. I went to my desk to perform an audit. In the world of security, we talk constantly about vulnerabilities, and mine was having my social security number in the hands of people who viewed me as a natural resource to be mined. While Savannah was upstairs, picking out silk pajamas for her new life at a prestigious private university, I was staring at my credit report. It was a graveyard of unauthorized debt. $45,000 in high-interest loans, all taken out in my name over the last 2 years. My parents hadn't just refused to pay for my college, they had stolen my credit to fund her luxury. I felt a strange, cold clarity in that moment. For years, I had been the silent investor in their twisted version of a family. I had worked part-time jobs since I was 16, slipping my father cash when he complained about emergencies, or letting my mother use my savings for household repairs that always seemed to coincide with Savannah getting a brand new wardrobe. I stayed because of the invisible chain, that psychological cage that keeps a child in survival mode tethered to a toxic home. It is a house with no bars, yet you feel like you can't walk out because you are still waiting for that one moment of pride, that one "I love you" that isn't purely transactional. But $45,000 of identity theft isn't a simple family disagreement. It is a hostile takeover. I didn't confront them. I didn't give them a single chance to gaslight me or to tell me I was being dramatic once again. Instead, I opened my laptop and I started clicking. I filed a report with the Federal Trade Commission. I called the fraud department of every single bank on that list. I told them the absolute truth. These loans were unauthorized, and I was prepared to press charges against the individuals who had forged my signature. By 4 a.m, I had frozen my credit and flagged my identity for theft. I packed one suitcase with my laptop, my textbooks, and the few clothes I had actually bought with my own money. I didn't leave a note. I didn't have anything left to explain to people who viewed my entire future as collateral for their favorite child's comfort. I left my house key on the kitchen counter, right next to the coffee maker my mother ran every morning at 6:15. As I walked toward the bus stop in the gray Texas dawn, I realized my compassion had been a luxury they had overdrafted for years. This wasn't a breakdown, this was a balance sheet finally being settled. I started the paperwork to legally change my name that same week. Madison Connolly died on that bus ride, and Madison Alcott was born, with nothing but a clear credit score and a relentless need to build a life they could never edit. 7 years passed. In the world of technology, that is an eternity. In the world of survival, it is just a long, exhausting string of nights where you forget what it actually feels like to be rested. I did not just attend university, I occupied it. I was the ghost in the back of the lecture hall, usually asleep by slide number 4, because I had just finished a double shift washing dishes at a greasy diner off of 6th Street. My hands were a living map of my so-called independence. They were red, cracked, and smelled permanently of industrial soap and lemon-scented degreaser. I remember staring at them during a final exam in network security, my fingers trembling so hard I could barely type. The girl sitting next to me had a perfect manicure, and a latte her father had probably sent her the money for 5 minutes earlier. She looked at my hands with a mix of pity and disgust, as if I were a glitch in her perfect world. I did not want her pity. I wanted her safety net. During those years, I learned about a hidden cost of being the difficult child. I call it the resilience tax. It is the invisible price you pay when your parents decide you are strong enough to handle being abandoned, so they can focus every single resource on the child who is too delicate for the real world. They used my strength as a convenient excuse for their neglect. Because I could survive without their help, they convinced themselves I did not need it. But being forced to be strong is not a gift, it is a trauma response. While I was sleeping in my jacket because I could not afford a winter coat, Savannah was finding herself in Europe. The algorithm, in its infinite cruelty, would occasionally slide a photo of her into my feed. Savannah on a balcony in Florence, sipping expensive wine at golden hour. Savannah holding a designer bag in front of the Duomo. She looked radiant, and she looked cared for. And the worst part was not just the favoritism, it was the math. I knew exactly how she was paying for that Italian summer. She was eating truffles and buying leather shoes with the $45,000 my parents had borrowed in my name. She was building memories on the ruins of my credit score. Every time I scrubbed a burnt pan or skipped a meal to pay for a certification exam, I was paying the interest on her luxury. I did not reach out. I did not send a single angry text. I just kept my head down, and I built my own firm, Crestline Security. I coded until my eyes bled. I audited systems for small businesses until my name became a whisper of reliability in the Austin tech scene. I did not build a company to get rich. I built it to become untouchable. Because when you have paid the resilience tax in full, you realize that the only person who can truly protect your future is the one you see in the mirror. By the age of 28, I had finally traded the smell of degreaser for the scent of high-end espresso and expensive server racks. Crestline Security was no longer just a folding table and a dream. We were the firm companies called when they realized their digital walls were made of paper. I had become an expert at finding the cracks people tried so hard to hide. We were in the final phase of securing a $5,600,000 contract with Lakefront Tech, a true powerhouse in the industry. It was the kind of deal that shifts the trajectory of a company forever. I had spent weeks in high-level meetings with their chief executive officer, Jackson. To him, I wasn't the girl who had been cast out with only $340 in her pocket. I was Madison Alcott, the sharp, clinical professional who had saved his entire network from a catastrophic breach during our initial trial run. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday, tucked inside a heavy, cream-colored envelope with gold embossing along the edges. It was an invitation to a wedding at the Stonebriar Estate, one of the most exclusive venues in all of Austin. I opened it at my mahogany desk, my hands no longer red or cracked, but steady and calm. Together with their families, Savannah Connolly and Jackson Webb request the honor of your presence. The air in my office felt suddenly thin. I read the names again. Savannah Connolly. Jackson Webb. My sister was marrying my biggest client. It was a collision of two worlds that were never supposed to touch. I sat back and I looked at the invitation. Savannah had always been the investment, and it seemed my parents were now doubling down. They were trying to buy their way into the Webb family legacy, using a version of Savannah that simply didn't exist. Jackson knew me as a peer, a specialist he respected. He knew Savannah as his fiancée. He had never seen a single photo of me at the Connolly house. Heather had scrubbed my existence from their walls years ago, telling Jackson that Savannah was an only child whose distant, troubled cousin had once caused the family nothing but grief. He had no idea that we shared the same blood or that I was the ghost that had haunted her childhood so she could shine. My compliance team was already running the standard audit on Lakefront senior personnel records. It was routine. Every employee, from the executives to the interns, had to be verified to ensure the $5,600,000 system we were building wasn't compromised from the inside. Savannah was listed as a senior marketing manager. I didn't ask my team to look closer. I didn't have to. My software is designed to be completely impartial. It doesn't care about family loyalty or golden children. It only cares about data integrity. I knew that once the verification engine hit Savannah's credentials, the lie they had spent years perfecting would start to unravel. I picked up my phone and called my best friend, Destiny. "I'm going to the wedding," I said. My voice was flat and focused. This wasn't about a celebration. It was about an audit. And at Stonebriar Estate, the final report was about to be delivered. The report arrived on a Saturday morning, a digital indictment delivered with clinical precision. In the world of high-stakes security, we don't look for feelings, we look for anomalies. And Savannah's life was one giant, flashing red light. My implementation team had flagged 3 names for extended verification as part of the Lakefront Tech audit, and Savannah's was right at the top of that list. The institutional verification from Syracuse came back as a no record for graduation. My sister, the investment child who had received $250,000 for a prestigious education, had actually dropped out halfway through her sophomore year. She had spent the rest of that money living a lie in Austin, waiting for a man like Jackson to provide the exit strategy she couldn't build herself. She had bypassed the usual rigorous background checks at Lakefront Tech by leveraging a high-profile referral and joining during a chaotic merger period when departmental oversight was at its weakest. But it was her professional portfolio that made my blood run cold. To land her supposed manager role at Lakefront, she had submitted a strategic market disruption study. I recognized the methodology immediately. I recognized the exact phrasing on page 12. She had plagiarized my senior research paper, the same 12 pages I had written in a dark break room between double shifts washing dishes. She hadn't just stolen my credit to buy shoes. She had stolen my mind to buy a career. The criminal ledger, however, had one final entry. Since I turned 21, I have monitored my social security number like a vault. While verifying the financial health of the immediate family linked to the Webb Connolly nuptials, I discovered a new hit on my credit profile. A second mortgage had been taken out on my parents' colonial home on Maple Ridge Lane. The amount was $180,000. The cosigner listed was Madison Connolly. She hadn't just stumbled upon me, she had hunted me down. When the wedding bills for Savannah started piling up, my mother ran a background check on my old social security number, expecting to find a ghost. Instead, she found my elite credit score and my professional profile at Crestline. To her, my hard-earned success wasn't a reason to be proud. It was just a new line of credit she felt entitled to: tax. My mother, Heather, had forged my signature once again. She hadn't gone to a traditional bank. She used an aggressive, private shadow lender that specialized in fast-tracked equity loans, bypassing strict notary requirements by submitting digital forgeries and using my high-level professional standing as a guarantee. They were throwing a wedding for their favorite child, using a loan they had stolen from the daughter they had discarded. They were, quite literally, bankrupting my name to keep up appearances for the Austin elite. I didn't scream. I didn't call them to demand an explanation. In cybersecurity, we don't warn the intruder while we are still mapping the breach. I simply printed the verification report and the mortgage documents. I placed them in a professional leather portfolio. Anger wasn't loud this time. It was clinical. This wasn't a family drama anymore. It was a criminal indictment. As the lead auditor for a $5,600,000 federal-grade security rollout, I had a legal and fiduciary obligation to report these anomalies. My silence wouldn't just be kindness, it would be professional malpractice that could bankrupt my own firm. My parents thought they were marrying into a fortune, but they were actually co-signing their own destruction. I checked the time. The ceremony at Stonebriar was less than 4 hours away. I called the local precinct, and I requested a meeting with a detective I had worked with on previous fraud cases. "I have a report to file," I said, "and I know exactly where the suspects will be." I informed the detective that the suspects were not only guilty of identity theft, but were currently using the stolen funds to solicit investment opportunities from the wealthy guests at the wedding, an active fraud in. progress that required immediate intervention. Inside my laptop, the screen glowed with a different kind of sunrise, the kind made of facts, numbers, and quiet retribution. The audit was complete. It was time for the reckoning. Stonebriar Estate was a monument to architectural deceit. 12 acres of rolling vineyards and oak trees decorated with loops of string lights that cost more than my entire first year of rent. 200 chairs were arranged in perfect rows, facing an arch covered in white roses that smelled like the $250,000 tuition check my mother had used to buy Savannah's entrance into this world. I walked in wearing a simple navy dress, carrying a leather portfolio that contained the total destruction of the performance surrounding me. Heather saw me before I even reached the third row. She didn't offer a hug or a welcome. She moved to intercept me with the precision of someone managing a glitch in a carefully curated program. "You're late," she hissed, her voice a sharp contrast to the soft string quartet playing in the background. "And you're certainly not sitting here. This section is for family. Move to the back near the catering entrance. We can't have you causing a scene with your bitter attitude today." I didn't argue. I didn't remind her that I was the one whose credit had paid for the very stones under her feet. I simply moved to the back, watching as the investment child, Savannah, floated down the aisle in a custom gown that was a physical manifestation of a 7-year lie. The ceremony began, but it didn't last even 3 minutes. Jackson stood at the altar, looking every bit the tech titan he was, until his eyes scanned the crowd and locked onto mine. The music didn't just stop, it died. Jackson turned pale, his gaze fixated on the back row. "Jackson, honey, what's wrong?" Savannah whispered, her voice amplified by the silence. Heather stepped forward, trying to salvage the moment. "It's nothing, Jackson. It's just Madison. She showed up uninvited to start drama. Ignore her." Jackson ignored Savannah instead. He stepped off the altar, his boots clicking on the flagstone with a rhythm that signaled a massive shift in power. He pointed directly at me. "Is that Madison Alcott, the CEO of Crestline Security?" My mother let out a short, high-pitched laugh. "CEO? Jackson, don't be ridiculous. This is just Madison, the difficult daughter. She's probably here to beg for a loan." "Shut up," Jackson snapped, the word hitting the garden like a gunshot. "This person is the only reason my company's infrastructure hasn't collapsed into a heap of lawsuits this month. She is M. Alcott, the lead consultant on our $5,600,000 security rollout." I stood up, and I walked down the center aisle, the leather portfolio held firmly in my hand. I wasn't the ghost in the back of the room anymore. I was the auditor. Heather's face shifted through colors I didn't know the human skin could produce. The elite of Austin began to whisper, the air thick with the realization that the Connolly family's social status was a house of cards. I saw then the truth about the absolute illusion of power in an empty wallet. For people like my mother, power is a layer of paint applied with money. When that money is revealed to be stolen, the paint peels, and there is nothing underneath to hold them up. I handed the portfolio to Jackson. "You asked for the final compliance report," I said, my voice clinical and clear for all 200 guests to hear. "It's all in here. The degree she never earned, the research paper she stole from my hard drive to land her job at your firm, and the forged second mortgage my mother took out in my name to pay for this ceremony." I looked back. 2 officers were walking through the garden toward the altar. This wasn't a wedding anymore. It was a crime scene. Jackson Webb didn't even need to read every single page of the portfolio. The look of pure terror on Savannah's face was a full confession. He took off his wedding band, and he placed it on top of the documents. "The wedding is over," he said. He walked off the patio and didn't look back once, his business partners following in a tight formation that signaled the definitive end of the Connolly family's social climb. The 200 guests sat in a silence so thick you could actually hear the oak leaves rustling. My mother didn't look at Savannah. She didn't look at the police. She looked at me with a composure that had finally shattered into raw, jagged edges. She called me a monster. She said I had destroyed my sister's life, but I didn't raise my voice. I told her that Savannah's lies had destroyed Savannah's life and that my company's compliance process had simply found the truth. I was done having conversations in corners. Heather and Brandon were escorted away in handcuffs. The charges for identity theft and mortgage fraud would ensure they faced consequences far more permanent than social embarrassment. They eventually faced foreclosure on the colonial house on Maple Ridge Lane, losing the very stage where they had performed their favoritism for 22 years. Savannah was terminated from Lakefront Tech before the very first news cycle could even hit. In the world of high-level marketing and security, credential misrepresentation is a note that follows you to every single future application. She had spent so long being exactly who they wanted her to be that she had forgotten to become anyone real. I am sitting in my office now. The Austin skyline is turning a brilliant orange through the window, and my team is growing every day. We just finalized that $5,600,000 contract with Jackson's firm. I look at my hands. They aren't red or cracked from industrial dish soap anymore, but I remember exactly the way they felt when I was 18 and had nothing but a single suitcase and a bus ticket. I've come to realize that blood isn't a bond, it's just biology. It took me a long time to understand that my mother's scale was broken, not me. She told me resilience was a gift, but she never actually gave it to me. I forged it myself in late-night kitchens and empty dorm rooms. Forgiveness isn't a door you slam shut. It's a door you open when you are finally strong enough to stand in the frame without flinching. If you are the scapegoat in your family, the one who is always too much or never quite enough, remember this: their rejection is not your reflection. You don't have to blow up a wedding to find your freedom. Sometimes it is just the word no, said once, clearly, and never taken back. You can survive without them. And once you really know that in your bones, nobody has power over you anymore. If Madison's story reminded you of your own, I would love to hear from you. Were you the golden child, or the one who had to build your own light? Share this with someone who needs to know. Their worth isn't defined by their family's rejection. Sometimes the story you needed to hear is the one someone else needed to send you. Thank you for listening. Take care of yourself.